Hi, good morning, everyone. Hope everyone is well and healthy and everyone feeling well. We have a very healthy list of people tuning in today, so this is awesome. And word is getting out, so please share that we are doing these online broadcasts. Today we have a stellar speaker, Josh Stone, good friend of mine. I'll introduce him in a minute, but first I wanted to a couple of announcements. One, as we're getting more popular, I'm going to have this sort of set up. If you have a question to ask, please ask it in the chat. So if you don't know where the chat button is, if you go down to the bottom of your screen of Zoom, there's a little button that says chat right next to share screen. So if you click that, there should be a chat option there. So rather than sort of just speaking up and interrupting, what we can do, it's a little easier if we just put the question in the chat, and then I can moderate the question. So unmute your microphone and then ask you to ask your question. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
So that's what
do we have new people today?
We have some new people, and I'm going to ask that in a minute, Adeline.
Okay.
So, all right. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, everyone, I would like you to mute your microphones and then also turn off your video screen. So the only thing I would like to see is your name. And then when again, if you have a question, you can put it into the chat or raise your hand. And then that way we can be safe. Internet safety is very important as well. And then we can have a good discussion, all right? And if I need you to turn on your microphones, I'll give those instructions. So lastly, I think most of you have done this, but if you could rename in the bottom left of your screen there, if you could rename like your actual first name. And we have people joining us from Virginia, and Dr. Josh, he's actually in South Carolina. So yes, so put your first name only and then where you're from. Williston, YSA, the moon, the sun, right? Okay, good. Excellent. So
Dr. Rob, I don't know how to change my name.
Okay, no, you're fine, Adeline.
Okay.
Right. Okay, so everyone's muted, everyone's got their microphones off. Excellent, good. So without further ado, I am going to introduce our special guest speaker today, Dr. Josh Stone. We can call him Dr. Josh. Welcome, thank you for taking the time to do this today, Josh. This is awesome. So actually, I know Josh from when he was in grad school. I was on his PhD committee up at the Virginia Institute of Marine Science. This is where also I got my PhD. And Josh did a stellar job on his project. And
Thanks.
so you should be able to see his CV here on the screen. So he's currently an assistant professor at the University of South Carolina, right? That's the other USC, or the only USC. Is that right, Josh?
Yeah, they've started rebranding to U of SC to avoid confusion, but yeah, it is.
Yes, that's very good. So, and he is a plankton ecologist by trade. And I'm going to post his CV on the website today. But you can see he's had a lot of experience working even in freshwater systems. In fact, I'm going to bring up his lab website here, and I'll share the link, and everyone should look at this. But here's some current research, right? So he's looking at freshwater jellyfish, and he's looking at some estuarine zooplankton, some of the things that we've been looking at YSA, something called diel vertical migration, which you might talk about today, right, Josh?
Yeah, I can. I I have it in there, but I'm happy to talk about any of these projects.
That's okay, because we're going to have Dr. Debbie Steinberg on in a couple of weeks.
Excellent.
Talking about the Twilight Zone. So she'll, if you don't talk about it, I'm telling you she will. And
yes, yeah. She is the expert.
I love your photograph page here. These pictures
thanks.
are magnificent. So without further ado, I'm gonna kick it over to you. And yeah, welcome. Thanks very much. And everyone, actually, this is a point where we can all unmute our microphones and give a big round of applause. Awesome.
Well, thanks everyone. Yeah, thanks Rob. Yes, actually, so Rob was, a mentor as I was in graduate school, and, instrumental in helping me do my research and graduate with my PhD. So I'm happy to, he's done a lot of things for me over the years, and I'm happy to return the favor, and I'm excited to talk to you guys. This seems like it's a lot of fun. This is way more exciting than what I had planned normally this week. So let me go ahead and bring up my PowerPoint slides. Sorry, I'm new to Zoom, and so I just want to figure out how to share my screen. There we go. All right. Okay, is that working? Can you see this Antarctic zooplankton? All right, great. Sorry, I have a second monitor up. You don't need to see this. Apologize. Let me just figure this out. I just put it up on this second monitor. Okay. How about that? Is that good? Okay, great. So today, so I've got lots of different things I can tell you about for zooplankton. So, once we finish with this, definitely ask questions. Also, feel free to stop me in the middle of my presentation if you have any questions or just about anything at all. So this is just really low key. Just want to tell you guys a little bit about some of the research I've done in the past. So this was research I did. This was maybe 5 or 6 years ago. Went down to Antarctica and did some research on zooplankton down in the Southern Ocean. So today I want to tell you a little bit about what zooplankton are, why they're important to us, things that I'm guessing Rob might have mentioned at some point. He also loves zooplankton. And then tell you a little bit about some of the Antarctic animals we see down there, as well as some of the research that we were doing, why we were doing it, and what are some of the things we are finding out about Antarctica and the oceans down there.
Did you see any penguins when you went to Antarctica?
Absolutely. I saw lots of penguins, and we even went to penguin colonies where there's hundreds of thousands of penguins all breeding on their nests. And so there's also, I wasn't studying the penguins specifically, I was studying the zooplankton, but there were people on board who, so we were on a ship the whole time, and there were people on board who specifically were studying the penguins. And so they would go out, count them, catch them, look at what they're eating, things like that.
Yeah, and I'm trying to get Hugh Ducklow.
Oh, awesome. Yeah, that would be great.
Who was just a brilliant person.
Yeah.
And he can talk about his penguins. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so what are zooplankton? Some of you guys might already know this. Do any of you, just show of hands, how many of you guys know what zooplankton are? All right, looks like a few, good number of you.
I did not see Joe raise his hand. So Joe is our resident freshwater copepod person who loves counting plankton.
Oh, awesome. Yeah, the freshwater copepods are really interesting. They're cool stuff.
No, that's a lot.
Okay, so zooplankton, it's just this fancy Greek word for planktos means like drifter or wanderer. And so it's basically any organism that's too small or too weak to swim against the current. So it just has to kind of drift wherever the water takes it. So it's a really just definition based on what it does more than its taxonomy or what it's related to or things like that. And so then we can further divide plankton into two groups. We have the phytoplankton, so these are the plant plankton, so these are little algae and things like that. And then we also have the zooplankton, which is the animal plankton. So you can remember that, like if you go to the zoo, you go to look at animals. So those are the animals in the water that are too small or weak to swim against the current. And these can be extremely diverse. So there's lots and lots and lots of different kinds of animals that are considered zooplankton. And so I spend all of my time thinking about zooplankton and studying them. And so just to give you some examples of what these might be, you can get these things like copepods, which Rob just mentioned. There can be lots of other kinds of weird crustaceans, like ostracods, some weird looking amphipods. We can get some cool krills. This is what I'll be talking about a little bit about what we were studying in Antarctica. Also a lot of fish. They're not in the plankton as adults, but when they're really young as larvae, they're really small and weak and they can't swim against the current. And so they're not plankton for their whole life, but when they're really young, they are considered part of the zooplankton. So a lot of, they're called ichthyoplankton. We can get these, kind of beautiful amphipods, these weird polychaete worms that swim in the ocean. These can be also things like these little rotifers, which are probably, if you have a puddle or a pond outside your house, there's probably these guys in there right now. They can be really abundant in fresh water. And then my personal favorite are the jellyfish. So even though these aren't really small, like a lot of these other zooplankton, they're very weak swimmers. And so they just kind of have to go wherever the currents take them. And so I've spent a lot of time thinking about jellyfish, and they're wonderful organisms to study and beautiful. And you can have all sorts of weird kind of microscopic plankton as well. Other kinds of, these weird, beautiful jellyfish too. So they are extremely diverse and can look very different and have very different kind of lives that they go through.
Okay, so Josh, first of all, I agree with Bethany. Tomopterus is a good one.
Yes.
That's that worm that's there. But Scott has a question.
Yeah.
And I don't know if he's free to talk because I know he was on another call, but did you take, go ahead, Scott.
Yeah, did you take these pictures?
Not all of them. I took some of these pictures, but
okay.
Like this really nice one I did not take, unfortunately. This is actually a deep sea siphonophore that I've never been down in a submersible, but yeah, I took some of these photos, but not all of them.
Okay.
And then Josh, there's the pteropod there. Do you want to quickly, I don't know if you're going to talk more about this, but they're pretty cool.
Yeah,
Bethany,
so
I agree with Bethany as well. Again, that's cool.
Yeah. So yeah, these are pelagic snails. So these are snails that live out in the open ocean and swim. So they, some of them do have shells, some of them do not. Actually, so this kind of species right here does not have a shell, but it is a snail. And so if you think about, if you've ever seen a little snail, they have like that foot that they attach to the bottom and then crawl along. And in these pelagic snails, that foot grows and spreads out and then forms these two little wings that it can then use to swim, and it just flaps through the water. And so that's what these are right here, are these little foot wings that it uses to swim. And some of these are called like sea butterflies because they look like little butterflies when they flap. And then this one is actually called a sea angel. This is a Cleone pteropod. And these actually are predators on other pelagic snails. So they're specialists and they just hunt down and feed on other kinds of pteropods. And actually in this picture, you can see in its gut right here, it's kind of some darker kind of brownish purpley spots, and that's actually the other pteropods that it's been feeding on, and you can see it in its gut because you can see right through its body.
It's interesting. Layla just said it looks like a weird angel, and then you said
Yeah, yeah. So that's actually, so this species, they're called sea angels, and actually they're really popular in pop culture in Japan. And so like around here, you might have little stickers on your binder of a polar bear, or you might have some pajamas that have polar bears on them, or things like that, just like pop culture animals. And so in Japan, these sea angels are one of those. And so you can buy little stickers that are little sea angels and get it on your coffee mug, a little sea angel cartoon. So they're really cute when they flap around.
Angie, do you want to mention your comment? She was saying that she had a game on her phone that involves sea angels.
Oh, really? Wow, that's great.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're amazing animals.
A tap fish, abyssarium, or something like that. Anyway, that's cool. We'll find the link to that game. That's a cool one. All right.
Yeah, that sounds great. I want to play that. Yeah. Cool. Well, moving on. What are some of the reasons that zooplankton are important to us? Why do we care? Why do I care about them? I mean, they're cute, they're adorable, they're amazing animals, but beyond that, there's some other reasons as well. So one is many zooplankton are actually harvested for humans to use. So these are species like krill, a number of jellyfish, copepods, and also shrimp. We just go out, we collect with nets, and then bring them to seafood markets, and people buy them and eat them. And so this is one reason that we care about zooplankton. And so these are things like krill. So krill are closely related to shrimp, but are a little different. And so we can also, so the krill are eaten, these jellyfish. So off the coasts of North Carolina, South Carolina, and Georgia, there's a species called a cannonball jellyfish. And so this is a picture of a cannonball jellyfish. And actually those are harvested for human consumption. So for people to eat, so they will collect them in nets, and then they take them back to a plant where they dry them out and cut them into little strips. And it'll look like little noodles when they're done with it, little jellyfish noodles. And then usually shipped to China, Japan, Thailand, where they're sold for people to eat.
I'm going to ask the question, Josh. Have you ever eaten jellyfish?
Yeah, it is good. It is
no, it's awful.
It doesn't taste like anything really. So the jellyfish noodles themselves mostly just taste kind of like salt water. They don't really have much flavor to them at all. And so oftentimes they'll just taste like whatever seasoning you put on them. So I've had it where they put like sesame oil and onions and stuff on them, and it's pretty good. You don't like it, Rob?
No, and for the third time today, like Bethany just put in the chat, I ate it in Hawaii. It's horrible, and it is. It's I'm je suis sans voix. I am without voice.
Yeah. Well, times I've had it, I've enjoyed it, but maybe it's not for everyone. So then we also, these copepods we mentioned earlier, they are also collected for people to eat in some places too. And if you kind of recognize this copepod, one thing you might recognize it from is actually, if you ever watch SpongeBob SquarePants, Plankton, the character Plankton, is actually a copepod. So they'll have, Plankton has one eye and these two long antennas and this kind of, rice grain shaped body, and that's how actual copepods look. So they kind of have this rice grain shaped body, these two long antenna, and then this little red dot right in the middle of its head is its one eye. So you were learning something while watching cartoons. And then, what the plankton you're probably most familiar with as far as people eating are shrimp. So they spend a good chunk of their time as plankton in the waters. All right. But there's some other reasons why we care about zooplankton as well, other than the ones we just eat. So one is they are a key link in the food webs between aquatic plants and like higher trophic levels in the food web. And so, you know, they feed on these algae and the organisms that make food from sunlight, and then they move it, when they get eaten, it gets moved up into things we might care about more, like fish or whales or dolphins or things like that. And so lots of things eat zooplankton, and they're a major component of these aquatic food webs. And then also, most animals at some point in their life, usually early on, are part of the zooplankton. And so they will, so I mentioned earlier, you know, fish spend a lot of time as zooplankton when they're larvae, but most other animals will start out as little larvae swimming around in the zooplankton. That's another reason we care about studying them, because almost all animals are zooplankton at some point in the oceans.
So Josh, just so that everyone understands, so does everyone understand what a phytoplankton is? So phyto meaning light, okay, and then plankton being really, really tiny, okay. So, and if you're in Wilmington, in the summertime, you'll notice that Greenfield Lake is completely green, right? I mean, I don't know if that's why they call it Greenfield Lake. I think of a person, but there's a huge algal bloom in there, and these are microscopic plants. So just like plants we see on land, they're harvesting light and growing and creating energy. The plankton are the conduits, right? They're transferring that energy into the fish that eat them, right? Hopefully that makes sense to everyone. Good.
Yeah. Thanks, Rob.
Yeah.
All right. And so because of that, because they move, you know, because they eat things, they eat these plants, and then they themselves get eaten by other animals, they move these nutrients through oceans and lakes in really unique ways that other animals don't. And so if we want to understand, you know, how nutrients, and, you know, our bodies are nutrients, bodies of a krill are nutrients, if we want to understand how nutrients move through the ocean, we need to understand how zooplankton live. So for my Antarctic research, I worked as, on this large project. So this is the Palmer Long-Term Ecological Research Project. And so this has been going on for decades. So, you know, many, many years, scientists have been working on this same project, and they go down to Antarctica and do kind of the same sampling every year, that so then we can compare from year to year what's been happening and look at, you know, these long-term trends in the environment. And so this is an annual cruise off of the western Antarctic Peninsula, and I'll show you a map in a second of where that is. And so this is 6 weeks. We go down in January and February. And so actually, because it's in the southern hemisphere, that's in summer. So January and February is during the summer season. We don't want to go down when it's too cold and dark all the time. So we go down in the summer. That's also when the most things are growing and there's the most animals down there. And this is a project that lots of different people are involved with. Lots of different kinds of scientists work on this project. And so we have people who are studying the physics of the waters and how they move down there. There's people who study the rocks and the mud and the sediments to see how it functions. There's chemists, there's microbiologists. So if you get Hugh Ducklow he was on these projects and works there as a microbiologist. So he studies these microscopic animals. There's ornithologists, so those are bird researchers. So you asked about the penguins. So they studied the penguins there, as well as some of the other seabirds. And then there's also mammalogists. So there's people who study the whales and the seals that live down there too.
So Josh, just to put it into perspective for our young scientists here, this is not just like a lab doing the work, right? These are people from all over the world that are collaborating, right?
Yes,
So where are they from? Like,
So there's people from all over the country. There's, I guess, now I have a hard time keeping track of everyone where they are. So you might be able to know better than me. But yeah, there's people in Virginia, up in New England, people from Colorado, all over, because people, there's different labs, but then they also hire people who are from other labs too, and all over the country, and yeah, even other countries as well will come on these cruises.
yeah. So as a follow-up with that, like any advice for youth that are wanting to get involved with science and start collaborating with other people?
Yeah.
How would you reach out and get involved with things like someone else?
So it's as easy as just asking to help out and saying you're willing to help out and volunteer is the best way to get started on that. So, you guys live near colleges, you live near universities where people are doing research. I know Dr. Rob has all sorts of people he knows who do research, and it's just as simple as asking, just writing an email and saying, this is my name, this is how old I am, this is what I want to do, I'm really interested, do you have anything you can help or that I can help with? And a lot of times they might say no, just because they're not working on projects where you would be able to help out at that point. But sometimes people will say yes, and they'll have something that you can help with. So I have lots of younger students in my lab who help out. They live here in Columbia and in South Carolina and come in to my lab and help out. So it's just as simple as asking and saying you're willing to help. And then once you start getting more experience and learning how to work in a lab, how to do science, then you can do it more and more. And eventually you get paid and to do it and can have a job doing science. And so all it takes is just asking around. And there's also lots of great ways that seems a little intimidating to start in someone's lab. There's lots of ways you can do projects on your own. And there's even, so Rob, I don't know if you've told them about or know about Zooniverse. So Zooniverse, sorry, what'd you say?
No, I haven't actually, and I can't believe that I haven't.
Yeah, so Zooniverse, it's zooniverse.org, ZOONIVERSE.
I'll put it in the chat.
Yeah, so it's a great website for citizen scientists. And so if I'm as a researcher need something, need to get lots of people to help out with my research, I might make a project on this website. And then other people, you guys, anyone in the world can go on and help out with that project. And so a lot of times these will be things like, you'll set up like a trail cam. So it's a camera where it takes images, every hour or something in a forest. And then we need people to go in and look at all these images and see what animals are there. A lot of times there's nothing, but sometimes there is. Where it's like videos of lions on the African savanna, and you have to keep track of them. Or there's lots of other, there's dozens of projects on that site, and they have little training to set you up on how to use it. So that's a great way to help out for science, without having to leave your house. You can just do it right online, and it's really valuable stuff. So I had a good friend who set up a project doing zooplankton identification on that site, and it was instrumental and really important for her research. So you guys should all check that out. All right, so some of the questions that I had and that my group was asking in Antarctica were, how do these zooplankton, how do they change from north to south? And so we kind of use this because it goes from warm in the north to colder in the south, kind of these subpolar or polar regions. And then also we can use that as a way of kind of figuring out what things looked like in the past when they were colder, and then what they might look like in the future as it warms. So this area of Antarctica is warming up really rapidly, even more so than the rest of the Earth. And so by looking at this, northern and southern stations, we can kind of predict how the rest of the world might look in the future, or the rest of the Southern Ocean. Yeah, Rob? Oh, you didn't have anything? Okay. So I also look at, what effects do these changes have on other animals? So what eats these zooplankton, and if their populations change, how does it change? And then how does that change where nutrients go in these oceans as well? So let me show you a little map here. So this is Antarctica. So normally when you look at a map, Antarctica is just this little strip at the bottom that's all stretched out and you can't tell what it looks like. So if you were looking down at the South Pole, this is what Antarctica would look like. And so the US, there's lots of research stations all over Antarctica, and the United States has 3 research stations. So they've got a research station right at the South Pole. They've got their largest one, McMurdo Station, down here on the Ross Sea. And then they have a smaller one called Palmer Research Station up here on the Antarctic Peninsula. And this is where the region that I was at, and we visited Palmer Station while we were down there. So this is the Antarctic Peninsula. It's this long peninsula that comes out into the Southern Ocean, and this is close to South America. So South America is right around here to orient yourself. So we actually fly down to the southern tip of South America to get on a ship, and then we'll come down across the ocean here to get down to this area of the Southern Ocean. And so we go on the western side of the Antarctic Peninsula, and this is our grid. So again, here's a little map of where we're at, South America, and then the Antarctic Peninsula. And then on here, this white is land, and then the gray is the different depths of the ocean. And this is our sampling grid. So each of these little black dots we go to, and we just go and, we're always moving and we're always doing work. And so we just keep going through, go to every one of these little black dots and take samples. And then we can look at, how things in the north compare to things in the south. And then also how things closer to land compare to things farther away from land as well.
How much gear do you take for your research?
That's a great question.
And how do you get it there?
So we have, we are on board this ship, and so we have to take everything that we need for 6 weeks with us. And so we have all sorts of gear, all sorts of science equipment, all of the food that we need. We're all on board this ship. And so this is the ship that we're on during those cruises, the Gould, Laurence M. Gould. And this is an ice reinforced ship. So it actually can go through small amounts of ice and it won't damage the ship. And then also on board this ship, they've got, there's lots of people on board. So we've got probably, 35 or 40 scientists on board. And then those are just the scientists. And then on top of that, we have to have all sorts of people who run the ship. I don't know how to steer a ship. I don't know how to do anything or steer a boat. And so we need people who do that, and that's their jobs. And so then there's another, 25 people or so on board who are just running the ship and cooking for us and repairing the ship and running the equipment and things like that.
And is it always like smooth sailing out there on the ocean? It looks pretty calm in this picture, no?
Yeah, sometimes we get lucky and it's calm, but it is not always calm. So it can get, in Antarctica, it can get really windy and the seas can get really large. And so, sometimes we'll have to stop working because it's just too dangerous to go outside on deck or too difficult. And so we just have to wait until the weather gets better and the waves get lower and the wind goes down to start working again.
Do you get seasick?
I do not get seasick, fortunately, but some people do. Well, everyone gets seasick at some point.
This is true.
But I usually don't get seasick under kind of normal conditions. But yeah, everyone does get seasick at some point. And so we go down on this ship and we'll take it down to, usually we start at Palmer Station. So on the map here, we start right here at Palmer Station. and will come into port. And so this is Palmer Station. So this is one of the Antarctic research bases that's down there. And there's people who live here year round. You know, there's definitely more people there in the summer when you can do more work. Because in the winter, all of this open water is covered in ice. And so you can't really get in or out of the station during the winter. But I do have, you know, I do know people who've overwintered there, and they stay, you know, for 6 months at a time on this Antarctic base. And so this is it. This is the whole base. You know, they've got their mess hall and science labs in here. They've got their dormitories and places to sleep and library in here. These large containers are filled with diesel fuel. So this is what they use to run all their generators. You know, they don't have electricity lines that they can just get to the station. They have to do everything themselves. You know, they make fresh water. And then they have to have food delivered and store it there. And so a lot of times that's what we'll do when we come down on our ship is we'll bring lots and lots of food with us that we then give to the station. And so they're always very excited to see us come in because they get fresh fruits and vegetables and things like that when we arrive.
Is there a little hospital?
Yes, yeah. So there's a little medical station, or you know, it's not a full building, but there's a couple rooms where they can do that as well. Because yeah, if you're there in the winter and you get sick, you can't come back to land. You have to be treated there. And so there's usually medical staff who work there as well in case something happens. So.
And also, like given the current situation here with the coronavirus, just getting from the ship onto land, there's a strict quarantine like procedure, right? Just to step foot from the boat onto land.
I think under normal circumstances, no. You can just go on. There's enough, especially during the summer. There's a lot of people coming and going, different ships, and so they don't try to do quarantining. But I would imagine now they probably are pretty shut down and are not allowing people to land. But you know, when we usually dock at Palmer Station, you know, we're not really working at that point. It's right before we start, and so we get to have a lot of fun. And we go and we climb up this glacier. We can go and check out the penguin colony that's nearby, and so it's a lot of fun when we get to go there because we're just waiting to start our work. All right, and so you know this. Again, this is not my picture here, but this is, you know, some of what Antarctica can look like. And so it's lots of ice, it's lots of rocks. There's no land plants down there, and so that's something that I notice a lot. Is there's just nothing that's green. It's just rocks and ice and water, and can look, you know, very beautiful, but also very stark. And a lot of times, you know, it's very overcast and foggy. And so in this area of Antarctica, it's often kind of really dreary weather and you can't see very far because it's lots of clouds and lots of fog and things like that, especially in the summer. But this is, you know, the penguins. We have a penguin colony back here. So if you see all these little black dots, these are penguin nests. And then these are some that have hauled out on iceberg and are just, you know, taking a break on the ice.
What sort of penguins are those, Josh?
So these are Adelie penguins, and I'll show you guys some pictures a little later of the different species that are down there. And so, you know, some of the animals that we see other than penguins is there's lots of seabirds. So these are some of my favorites. This is an albatross. This is actually a species of albatross called a light mammaled albatross, and they're just beautiful. These animals, you know, they'll be out at sea on the ocean for years at a time. They won't come to land except when they want to nest and reproduce. And so they just live out on the ocean for years and years and never come to land at all. So unless you go out to sea, you would never see these birds. But they're amazing animals. We also have lots of cool animals like penguins. So these are emperor penguins. These are the largest penguins. And they live, you know, down at the very southern part of the world. They're the southernmost kind of penguin species. We did get to see a few of these on the ice when we were down there. We also have lots of whales. So Humpback whales are really common down there, and that's what this is a picture of. But there's also lots of other whales like minke whales or killer whales that we'll see too. And so they come down here because there's lots and lots of food in the summer. And so these whales, they go through these long migrations. So they'll go to the tropics in the winter where it's nice and warm. And then in the summer, they'll come down to Antarctica, and then they'll just eat. And they'll eat and eat and eat, and they'll fatten up. And a lot of times then they get so fat that they can survive the rest of the year without feeding too much. Because if you're in the tropics, there's not much food. So they'll just kind of hang out in the tropics and live off their fat reserves that they built up in Antarctica over the summer.
There looks to be something growing on that whale, Josh.
Yeah, so lots of things grow on whales. So right here along its front, you see these little bumps. Those are barnacles. So a lot of times these humpback whales will have barnacles growing on them. And then also in those barnacles, there'll be lots of little different animals. There's actually a thing called whale lice that are these little crustaceans that just live on whales and just hang out there their whole lives.
So Yadira wants to know, what type of whale is that?
This is a humpback whale.
Humpback.
Yep. So you can see these are all over the world's oceans, and you can see humpback whales, pretty much in any ocean at some point of the year. We also get lots of seals, so we see lots of cool seals down there. This is a leopard seal. So these guys are, you might be able to tell from these teeth, these guys are predators. So they hunt and they'll feed on penguins. They'll eat other seal species. And they are kind of some of the top predators that down there into Antarctica. So if you see one of these guys, you definitely want to give it a wide berth and steer clear. And the penguins certainly do as well. And then this guy down here in the corner, this is actually one of my favorite Antarctic species. This is called a sheathbill. So they're these birds. They look like, they almost look like big pigeons, and they walk around. They kind of look like, sometimes they're called Antarctic chickens because they kind of run like a chicken, and they just live near seal colonies and seals, and they eat all of the kind of gross stuff that the seals don't want to. So they'll actually eat poop, and they'll eat mucus that the seals give off, or like leftovers too. So there's actually some of these sheathbills that hang out at Palmer Station and near the garbage dump, and they'll just like go and eat all of the garbage, and they love it. They're really excited about whenever they find some good garbage to eat.
So just a regular school lunch, right?
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. All right. But all of the animals down there aren't just these, big mammals and birds. There's also really cool plankton down there too. So this is a picture of some copepods from Antarctica. So these are really large for copepods. These might be a half an inch in length, and they can have these really beautiful colors, and they look incredible. Also get things, oops, I guess that was, yeah. So there's lots of these really cool animals. I showed you some pictures earlier of some of those Antarctic zooplankton. So when we're down there, we need to collect these animals. They're in the water, and we need to collect them, and so we can study them. And so I have a little video here, hopefully this works, of us doing some sampling. And so this is what we'll do. We have this net that we have on the back of the ship, and we'll just tow this net through the water, and then everything that collects in the net, we bring on board. And so you can see it's a little, the weather's a little rough on this day. It's not too rough not to work, but we can see these guys are actually strapped in so they can't fall overboard. And this is Joe Cope. This is a guy that Rob and I worked with for many years on the right. And then this is one of the ship's technicians on the left. And so, we've been towing this net through the water for, a half hour or an hour, and now they're bringing it back on board so that we can see what's been collected in the net study.
So Josh,
So
how cold's the water there?
So the water is, you know, for water to be liquid in the ocean, you know, it has to be above 0 degrees. So it's pretty close to that. A lot of times, you know, this is melted, you know, ice that's melted recently. So the water is right at, you know, just above freezing point, you know, usually around 1 or 2 degrees Celsius. So that's about 34, 35 Fahrenheit. All right, and then all the little animals are there at the end, and we collect those. And then we'll dump those out into a big bucket, and we look at all of the animals that are in there. And so this is some of those krill that we've just collected in the net, and then we'll put them in this bucket, and you can see they're all swimming around. They're very confused why they are in a bucket and not in the ocean anymore. And so then we will take those animals, and most of what we do is count them and measure them. And so we want to see how many are there and what kinds of animals they are. And so we will go into the lab, and we will go through and sort them all. And it's a big task. It takes a lot of time and a lot of people to go through, identify everything, count it. These are a bunch of little krill that we've lined up to measure how long they are. And we're studying them. So that's mostly what we do down there is we do these net tows, we bring them on board, and then we measure and identify and count them.
Josh, so what happens with these? Oh, you're probably going to talk about this, right? What eats them?
Yes, yeah, I will. Yeah. So these, the main species that we're interested in down there is the Antarctic krill. So these are these large zooplankton, you know, they'll be about that long or so. So it's large for a zooplankton. And they actually school together. So they form these large schools and groups, and they'll live for multiple years. So a lot of zooplankton only live for a few months, maybe, or 1 year at most. But actually these krill live for multiple years, which is a really long time. And they are the most abundant species of any species on Earth, and this is by weight. So if you took all the animals on Earth and weighed them, the species that would have the most would be these krill, this one species of krill. And so there are lots and lots and lots and lots of krill down there, and they are really tasty. Lots of things love eating krill, and this is one of the reasons we like to study them. Because they're so abundant, but they also are this major link in the food web. So they feed on the plants that are down there. So these little algae that grow underneath the ice. They also feed on the phytoplankton that are floating around in the water. They might also feed sometimes on other zooplankton. But then those are really small things. So a whale, it can't really feed on phytoplankton. A fish can't really feed on phytoplankton, but these krill can. And then the whales and fish can then eat the krill. And so almost everything down there eats krill. Penguins, seals, whales, birds, fish, they're all feeding on these krill. We try them sometimes. So if we get a big catch, we'll take a bunch of krill to the kitchen, and they'll fry them up into little krill patties. And those are quite tasty, really good.
There's a question here from Zoe.
Yeah.
Zoe, do you want to ask your question? Hang on, let me unmute her. Oh, okay, go ahead.
When you were studying the animals, did you find anything interesting about them?
Yeah, all sorts of interesting stuff. So, you know, I'll talk a little bit about that in a second, but, you know, we really, you know, we like finding out why there's more krill some years and why there's fewer krill other years. And so what we found is that a lot of times if it's really warm in the winter and there's not a lot of sea ice, then that's bad for the krill. So they really like having ice and during the winter, and if there's not enough, then they don't survive as well. So that's one thing we found out as well. And then I'm going to get to a couple of our results here too. So I just want to tell you about one more animal, the salps, and then I can tell you a little bit about some of the results that we've seen and some of the things we found out about them. So salps are kind of jellyfish. So this is a picture of a salp here. They almost are like a tube of jelly. So if you imagine like a hollow tube made of just gelatinous goo, that's what a salp is. And they feed on phytoplankton. So they feed on the same things that the krill do, but they feed in kind of a different way. And then they can reproduce really rapidly. So when conditions are really good, when the water's warm, when they're really happy, they can reproduce, and there can be salps everywhere. They form what are called blooms. So they can just be lots and lots of salps everywhere. And so what some of the researchers have found is that actually as waters warm up, then the krill are replaced by these salps. And so the krill like the colder water and the salps like the slightly warmer water. And so this is just a map. You don't need to worry about these other things and the numbers, but these are maps of Antarctica. And basically in this top area, these are krill. And if it's a red square, it means that there's fewer krill now than there used to be. If it's a blue square, that means there's more krill than there used to be. And so you can see a lot of this area, there's lots of red squares. And then this bottom map, we have salps, and it's the same thing. You can see there's lots of blue, and so there's lots of more salps than there used to be. And so what we're finding is that as Antarctica warms up, it's switching from having lots of krill to having more salps, and the krill are actually decreasing in a lot of these areas.
Sammy has a question. I'm going to unmute the microphone, Sammy, for you. Hang on. You might have to do it yourself. Sammy, if you want to ask your question.
Can the little jellyfish that look like tears sting?
That's a great question. So no, these guys actually cannot sting. So they are a lot friendlier to work with, and they don't sting you. And a lot of jellyfish, also like around where you guys live, some of the kinds of jellyfish do sting, but some of them also do not. So it just depends on what kind of species it is. So this is a great reason to learn how to identify jellyfish, because then you can know whether they sting you or not. So these do not sting. So why does this matter? Why do we care that there's more salps and fewer krill? So in these warmer years, these are better for salps and worse for krill. And the main reason is that krill are delicious, but salps are not. So the salps are just these kind of blobs of goo, and they're not very tasty, and there's not many nutrients in them. But the krill are really tasty and have lots of nutrients. And so this matters for things like penguins or whales, or all the things that we care about, because they feed and eat the krill, but they're not very good at eating salps, and they're not very nutritious either. So this is a little video I have of a penguin colony. There is lots of little penguins. They're sitting around on their nests. These are Adelie penguins, is the name of this species. And I'm just not going to talk, because I'm going to play this video, and hopefully you'll hear, you'll be able to hear some of the calls that these penguins make.
No, sorry, Josh, no sound.
Oh, okay. I don't know how to do that. Well, you can see them. So this is a penguin displaying. So this is a penguin that is calling to try to find his mate, or to attract a lady penguin over. And they'll do this little flapping, and he's making some noises as well. So you guys can look up, Adelie penguin calls on your own and hear what they sound like. And these are the little chicks. So these little all dark penguins are the baby penguins that are growing up in our chicks right now.
Josh, you have to make the sound.
What'd you say?
You have to make the sound.
Oh, I do. Yeah,
go on,
it's kind of like
do it.
Kind of sounds like a donkey or something like that too. Yeah, we'll try that. I'll practice and let you guys know when I get better at it.
And then
But one
Zoe
thing I
had a
wanted to
question about, is a penguin colony like a school of fish?
No, not, I mean, it's where lots of them live together, but it's a little different. So a school of fish would be, when these fish are all moving together and they're, looking for prey together or trying to avoid predators together. But the penguins, the colony is just a group where they live and nest. And so penguins, most of the time, live out in the ocean. They live out at the sea. They can be out in the open water for, months at a time. And they only come onto land to lay their eggs and raise their young. And so they all tend to do it kind of in the same area. And this is to help prevent predators. So in that way, it is very similar to a school of fish. Because if you're with a group of your friends, it's harder for a predator to pick you off than if you're by yourself. So one thing I wanted to point out are these rocks. They have kind of this pink stuff all over them. Do any of you guys know or want to guess what this kind of pink sludge is on the rocks and why it's pink?
I'll let Angie, you have a go at that.
Okay.
Angie or Bethany? We'll go with Angie first.
All right.
I said dye.
Oh, dye. That's a good guess. That's a good guess.
I'm gonna go with
maybe.
Penguin guano for 500, Alex.
Yeah, that is the right answer. Yes, so this is penguin guano. And are there any guesses on why it's pink? So this is penguin poop that this just accumulated all around their nests. Any guesses why it's pink?
They eat shrimp or something.
Yes, that is exactly right. So it's the same color as the things they eat. So if I just go back to the krill, you notice these krill have this kind of orangish pink color to them. And so when the penguins eat them and then poop them out, it's still pink. And so the penguins are mostly feeding on these krill. And so when there's very few krill and more salps, then the penguins have less to eat. And then there's fewer penguins. They have a harder time raising their young and surviving through the winter. So this is one of the reasons we care why krill are decreasing and salps are increasing. And this is just a great photo I took of a baby penguin. So they're so cute and adorable. This is one it's been raining recently, and so he's been walking around in some of this pink sludge. And also is molting right now. So birds will lose their baby feathers and grow in their adult ones. And so that's why it looks like he has a little bit of a hairdo. So they are just so cute and adorable. So not just penguins, but other animals too feed on these krill. So these are called crab-eater seals. And do you guys have any guesses what crab-eater seals eat?
Crabs.
That is a good guess, but it is wrong, actually. So crab-eater seals were named.
Crabs.
Yeah, they actually don't eat crabs. So there's actually no crabs in Antarctica. Crabs don't live there at all. But what they do eat is they eat krill. And so when the first Antarctic explorers came down to Antarctica, they captured some crab-eater seals. They looked at what was in their stomachs, and a chewed up, digested ball of krill looks a lot like a chewed up, digested ball of crabs. And so the explorers thought, it's probably crabs, and just named them crab-eater seals without knowing there wasn't actually any crabs around. And so the name has stuck, but they actually feed on these krill. And so you can see these are some that have hauled out on the ice and are resting, and you can see these little pink stains on the ice, and that is actually the crab-eater seal poop that is pink again from the krill that they are feeding on. And so another thing about these crab-eater seals is actually these are one of the most abundant kind of carnivore mammals on Earth. And so you think about, if you think about like a carnivore mammal, it's like a lion or a wolf or a bear, something like that. But actually these crab-eater seals are the most abundant ones on the planet. And there's, you know, millions and millions of them down in Antarctica.
Anyone hungry so far?
Do you guys want to try some krill?
Popcorn.
No, I do not want to try krill, but I am hungry.
Yeah,
I bet it's delicious.
they are. They taste a lot like shrimp.
So Yadira
I
has
don't
a question.
eat shrimp.
Yadira, do you want to unmute your microphone and ask your question? I could do it for her, actually.
Okay.
Where is she? Oh, she said she doesn't have a question, actually.
Oh, okay.
All right, go ahead.
All right. And so this is a great picture that I took. So this is Debbie Steinberg, who was both Dr. Rob's and my advisor when we were in grad school, and hopefully she'll be able to talk to you guys in a couple weeks. But here she is proudly holding 2 bags of seal poop. And so on the left, we have a crab-eater seal poop, and you can see the color is pink from eating those krill. And then on the right, this is a different kind of seal called a Weddell seal, and it's all dark. And actually the Weddell seals mostly eat fish, and so their poop is a different color. And so we study a lot of different kinds of poop because it lets you know what the animals are eating and how much they're eating. And so this is another reason we care about krill, is that they are a huge part of some of these animals' diets. And so I promised you guys some more penguin photos. So these are just some of the 3 of the main species we see down in Antarctica. This is the Adelie penguin here in the upper left. This is a chin strap penguin. So they have a little black chin strap that goes around their face.
It looks like he's wearing a bicycle helmet.
Yeah, it does. It does look like they're wearing a helmet. This is a little chin strap on, keeping his helmet on. And then this is a Gen 2 penguin. And so actually one of the things that's happening is these Adelie penguins are more adapted to really cold environments, so the far south. But these other 2 penguins, the chin strap penguins and the Gen 2 penguins, they are more adapted to kind of the more, a little warmer. They're still, you know, they're not in like the tropics, but they are in not quite as far south as the Adelie penguins are. And so one thing we're seeing in Antarctica as it warms up, that the Adelie penguins are moving farther and farther south, and also their populations are going down. But the Gen 2 and the chin strap penguins, their populations are increasing, and they are coming farther south than they used to be because of that. And part of that has to do with their food. And so this is why, again, we're studying zooplankton, because we might think, okay, why are some of these penguins decreasing and some of them increasing? It actually has to do with their food, and what they're eating affects how they live and where they live. One thing I want to point out here with this Adelie penguin, hopefully you can see this, inside its mouth, you can see the roof of its mouth and its tongue are covered in all these little barbs and spikes. And so they actually use that to capture the krill while they're swimming around. And so if you're, imagine you're in the water, there's a little slippery krill that's, you know, trying to swim away from you. And if you get it in your beak, you have these little spikes that point backwards, and it helps you hold on to that krill and swallow it underwater when it's really slippery. So with that, I'm happy to talk about any other things. If you have any other questions, or yeah, I'm here for you guys. And if you have any questions about other Antarctic animals or some of the other research I'm doing, or what it's like to live down there, please let me know.
Is krill only in Antarctica?
That's a good question. So no, there are lots of different species of krill. So that one species I was telling you about, the Antarctic krill, they are just in Antarctica and they only live there. But there's lots of other kinds of krill that live all over the world, in many different places.
What type of seal that said? What type of seal is that seal that on top is like questions and a big nose?
Yeah, so that is a Weddell seal. So that is the one that had the dark poop we saw earlier. And they make, what you should do too is look up, they make these really amazing noises. So they sing these songs that sound like it's an alien singing or something. They can be incredible noises. So you guys should definitely find a video of a Weddell seal. It's Weddell. And listen to what they sound like. It's incredible.
Can you say that again? I did not know how to spell that.
Yep, I'll put it in the chat here.
One step ahead of you. Already.
Oh, okay.
Seal. Oh, sorry. Why did I put penguin? No, Josh is right. It should have been seal. Very, very good. Angie has a question.
All right.
My question was, how many penguins have you done studies on?
So I actually don't study penguins. They're fun to look at, and I care about them, but I don't really do research on penguins. There are other scientists who are part of this project who study them as well. But they study, lots of different species down there, the 3 that I just told you about, as well as the emperor penguins. And they, some of those penguin colonies where they all get together and nest, there's hundreds of thousands of penguins in those colonies too.
Can you show a picture of an emperor penguin?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so I think at the beginning of my talk, I had a picture of them.
And I also have a follow-up question to what Angie's question was about. So maybe you could talk about some of the other research projects that you have worked on and are currently working on.
Yeah.
And then any advice for youth just wanting to get involved in this line of work of oceanography and marine science, and because it's so diverse, right? It doesn't necessarily have to be field; it could be in the lab or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Some of the other work I'm doing is related to jellyfish. So I'm doing some work with freshwater jellyfish. So there's one species of jellyfish that lives in freshwater. They're very small. They're only about the size of a dime. So you don't usually notice that they're there, and they also don't sting people. But not a lot's known about them, but they're kind of everywhere. So if you have a lake near you, there's a good chance that there are freshwater jellyfish in that lake. You just don't know about it because they're only there at some times, and they're really small, clear. So what I'm trying to do is
we get them in retention ponds here in Wilmington.
Oh, great! Yeah. So the Craspedicusta sourby is the species name, and that's great. Yeah, they're really interesting animals, but not a lot's known about them. And so some of the things I'm working on is trying to figure out, where they live, where they like to live, how fast they can grow, and things like that. I'm also working on some research on the coast of South Carolina. So there's a estuary there, so kind of a marsh with some water where the ocean mixes with the river. And there are, those are really important areas for lots of animals. They use them kind of as nursery habitats, and they'll grow their young in those estuaries. And so I have a project that's been going on for many, many years. I didn't start it. It was started before I was born, where they go and collect zooplankton, every 2 weeks since 1981. And they now we have all of these samples, and we can look at what have been the kind of big changes that have been happening over decades. And this allows us to ask some of these questions about how do zooplankton change over long time periods and in response to climate change. And then also I do some work out in the ocean, so near Bermuda, looking at the zooplankton communities there and how they move through the ocean. So a lot of animals in the ocean they like being in the dark because then their predators can't see them. And so they'll be down in the deeper water during the day, and then they come up to the surface at night, and they move up and down on this daily cycle. And so some of the research I'm doing is trying to figure out, you know, how that evolved, what are the causes and why they're doing that, and how different species do that movement differently, because that movement has a really large effect on lots of things in the ocean. So those are some of the projects I'm working on now, but I definitely, you know, I'm interested in all sorts of zooplankton and jellyfish, and I'm always trying to start new projects too.
So while you pull up that emperor penguin picture, Joss, I'm going to ask if anyone's got any last minute questions. I think we might have time for one more question before we wrap it up.
Yeah, let me, oops, there we go. Can you see that?
You took that one, yeah?
No, I did not take that photo. It's a pretty good photo. Yeah, I did take some photos of emperor penguins, but we're much farther away because we were just up on the ship looking down at them. And so we weren't able to get this close to them. But yeah, they're large. So they're about 4 feet tall. So they're pretty beefy animals.
So I'll ask the last question. How did you get into science? What made you interested?
Oh, yeah.
Like, were you always interested? Did you want to be something else and then change your mind?
Yeah, so
What got you hooked?
great question. Yeah, and sorry, I need to answer your other question too. So I was really fortunate, and my dad was a biologist. So he worked for national parks and the National Fish and Wildlife Service. And so he was a biologist. And so he always, you know, took me outside. I would go to work with him and do, you know, count squirrels and collect, you know, animals and things like that. And so he, you know, just hanging out with him, he got me very interested in biology and nature. He tried it with my sisters too, but it didn't stick with them as much. So I don't know what's different about me. But so just from a very young age, I was always interested in animals and learning cool facts about them and what's going on in the world and outside. And so I just kept doing that. So, as I was in school, I was really interested in my science classes and my math classes. Those are really important in science. So even, being able to do math well is really important to being a scientist, and really helped. It's not a requirement. You can definitely be a good scientist without, loving math, but being able to use it is really helpful. So, I, did well in school. And then once I got a little older, once I was in high school, I started volunteering in some labs around where I lived, and just, like I said, just asking about whether I could help out. And I had some great people, some great scientists who helped me learn how to be a researcher. They helped me, get a project started. And so that was, it just goes from there. And so once you do one project, it's easy to do another one, and then it's easy to do the next one. And then, then you just stay with it. And if it's something you really enjoy, then if you keep doing it, you'll get good at it, and you can end up doing it as a career. It's definitely a lot of hard work. Being a scientist is oftentimes just counting things, or counting things for months at a time. But it can be really rewarding, and I really enjoy it a lot. And I get to, do great travel for my job and see lots of cool animals in cool places. And I really like it a lot now. So, my advice to you guys would be, like, definitely, do well in school, do well in science and math. That's, the most important thing you can do right now. And then also just get outside and learn the animals around you. There's lots of really cool animals in North Carolina, all over the place. And so, going outdoors and just turning over rocks, looking in creeks, grabbing a net and, pushing it through a pond, and just seeing what you catch can be so much fun. You know, Dr. Rob can certainly point you guys in the right directions of how to identify these animals. There's lots of great field guides and books out there. So, you know, that's what I would recommend too, is just go outside and see what's there. There's so many cool animals. You know, I could talk all day about the cool stuff in North and South Carolina, and just waiting for you guys to find it. So that's another great thing you can do as well. And then, you know, being able to do science fair projects and learning how to do science is also really important too. So you have the opportunity to, do a project, once you get a little older, ask to volunteer in a lab at a local college or university. Being involved, doing the Zooniverse or other citizen science projects can be really good too. So there's all sorts of stuff to do, and just do what's fun. Like if it's more fun to, look at some data and try to make graphs, do that. If it's more fun to go outside and, get dirty and catch animals, do that. So just do what's fun with animals. That's an awesome answer. That's a huge soundbite there. That's good. I think everyone should replay that soundbite because there's some really, really good advice there. Well, thanks. Well, I think we'll wrap it up here, but Josh, thank you very much for your time. And I think absolutely. Angie's got a few words she wants to share with you. Okay, yeah, great.
Thank you for the talk and also for your time. It was very great. And also, I learned a lot of stuff today. Oh my. Well, thanks. You're very welcome. This has been a lot of fun for me. I get to talk about all the cool stuff all the stuff that I think is cool for a while and have a great audience. So I really appreciate being able to do this. No, it was awesome, Josh. I just wanted to say, if any of you guys have any other questions later, Rob can give you my website, and it has my contact information there. So, you can send me an email, give me a call. Anytime, I'm happy to talk about all of these animals or research or science. So feel free to, send me an email and contact me in the future. Even if it's years from now, just look me up. Awesome. All right, everyone, big round of applause, and we'll let Josh get back to his day. Thank you. Yeah. Thanks, Josh. That was awesome. Yeah, I'm glad you enjoyed it. I really did too. And we should chat, Rob, sometime. Okay.